Brian, thank you for presenting, and please
thank you very much. Okay. So many familiar faces. That'll make it easy. So, today I'm going to talk about the gas tax, and specifically California's gas tax, and possibly changing that. And first, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important that we do something about it, and then we'll get into what are some of the health impacts and the equity issues involved in possible changes to the gas tax. Now, usually public health people like spending money. It's like if you have a program, right, somebody else's money, not their own. So what's really different about this particular issue that we're using health impact assessment to look at is we're looking at what are the health impacts of generating revenue, of raising money. We're not going to look at how to spend it, although that's important too, but that's another study. So the gas tax. First of all, a little bit about our project team. Besides myself, we had Dr. Jackson involved in this, Marty Wax from the School of Public Policy, previously at Berkeley. He's also affiliated with RAND. One of the world's leading experts in transportation finance, definitely leading expert in the U.S. and probably one in the world. Dr. Fielding, statistician, analyst Eric Brown, who was previously up in urban planning, Maddie Brosen, who's still up at the Lewis Center, and we worked with an organization called CPEN, California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, and our contact there, Ruben Cantu, really helped us do a lot of outreach and stakeholder engagement, because although I'm going to present a lot of technical things today, we distilled at the beginning of the study kind of the scope of work, how are we going to do this, what are the questions we should be asking, and then at the end the results, several different iterations of the results, and ran those past community groups who might be affected by this, especially looking at low-income populations. And so we had groups in Sacramento, LA, Oakland, and Fresno who gave us a lot of feedback on this, and Ruben helped us with that. So the problem is that the gas tax, it was a good idea probably when it was first introduced. A little bit of trivia. The state that first introduced the gas tax was not California, it wasn't New York, it was Oregon. Oregon. Well, yeah. And that was back around 1920. And they wanted to build roads, and how are we going to pay for these roads? Well, get the people who are going to use the roads to pay for them. And what's a way we can do that? So at first, there were toll booths everywhere. And pretty soon the people said, you know what, that's not going to work. Especially in eastern Oregon, 200 miles from the nearest town, and just to have a toll booth, not going to work. So they came up with the idea of the gas tax, and then federal authorities and other state authorities said, hey, this is a really great idea. This is a really efficient, effective way to raise revenue for building roads and maintaining them. Although, and maintaining part's problematic, as we'll get into in a second. So that was a good idea, and most places that have instituted the gas tax said, we're going to just charge a certain number of cents per gallon of gas. Well, there's two problems with that. One is inflation. So when you set your gas tax at 1 cent per gallon, back in 1920, that 1 cent might have gone a long ways. Doesn't go very far now. And your typical state legislature or Congress is not really excited about constantly raising taxes. So these taxes tend to stay fixed, and they lag behind inflation. And that's what I'm showing here, is the actual value is decreasing over time. So even between 1960, the gas tax that was bringing in, and this is I think millions of Oops, sorry. What was $33,000 is now about a fifth of that value in 1990, a little bit more in 2000. The other thing that's happening besides inflation, and this graph is taking into account both of these, is gas mileage. That people are buying more fuel-efficient vehicles in general. And so for all the miles that people are driving, there's less revenue coming in. So we have inflation and we have more mileage. The other problem we have, this is shown by the next one, is our great boom in building roadways in the United States was in the 1950s. And depending on the type of construction, they have more or less a 50-year lifespan. So that means we invest all this money into building, we didn't invest in maintenance. We didn't set aside money for maintenance. So we have this huge and growing shortfall in the money needed for maintenance. So we have pretty constant funding level. It's declining when you account for the value of it, accounting for inflation, but then we have this growing need for maintenance. How are we going to pay for this? Just about every transportation expert and policy person out there, right wing, left wing, Democrat, as long as they are living on Earth, they say we have a big problem and we need to do something about it. Where there's disagreement is on what to do. So some people say, just raise the gas tax. Just put on another few cents per gallon. Some people say, well, you could tie it to inflation. Well, that helps a little bit with the inflation problem. It doesn't help with that problem of, the people who are using hybrid cars, electric cars, they're not going to be paying into the gas tax. And they're driving on the roads, and it doesn't matter, what kind of vehicle, what your powertrain is, you're still impacting the road, you're impacting other people. Now, you might be producing less air pollution, but a lot of the other impacts are just the same. Another little bit of trivia, at highway speed, the noise produced by a car, an electric car, is just the same as a gasoline-powered car for the same weight. So weight does impact it. But so when you hear or don't hear the little Prius going by at 5 miles an hour, and you do hear your gasoline-powered engine, okay, at that speed, yes, there is a difference, but at highway speeds, there really isn't. So cars are creating, depending on the fuel train, they might be creating air pollution impacts, noise impacts, congestion impacts. Yeah.
None of this money actually goes to those external costs, though. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, right.
Pricing for the health costs, the noise costs.
Right, but we do an analysis that does get into that, and you're using the road, and your roadway needs to be maintained. Just this morning, coming in, I heard there's a report out. I just heard this on the radio. Haven't read it yet, but the average Angelino pays an extra $9,000 per year in maintenance costs because the roads are so bad. LA has the second worst roads in the country after San Francisco. San Francisco is always, a little notch better, but or worse, actually. So the average Californian pays a little over $200 a year in gas taxes. Now, this is important to keep in context that the average vehicle cost, depending on how much you drive and everything, is getting up towards $5,000. So the gas tax is a small part of your total vehicle operation costs, each year. Also, the average Californian owns 1.2 vehicles. How much people pay, sorry, this is a lot of information crowded together here. How much you pay in gas tax each year will vary depending on where you live. Urban, everything else being equal, people in urban settings pay 162 versus rural 176. This baseline is not this is a different data source, so the total, the averages are a little bit different than the previous slide. Low-income folks who drive less, they're going to be spending $137 per year.
Quintile 1 is lowest income.
Lowest income. Highest quintile of income, 176. It varies by ethnicity. They don't ask you at the gas pump what ethnicity you are and charge you different rates, but people of different ethnicities have a propensity to drive more, drive less, choose different cars, and those factor into this, how much gas tax you're going to be paying each year.
Brian, I just want to,
Yeah.
some of it too is related to land use, right? So it's an affordability factor, so that people
Right.
are driving more in some instances.
Yeah, if you look at just pointer isn't working well. Just mileage, this group here, the second quintile, they drive the most miles per year, everything else being equal. They're driving a little bit more fuel efficient vehicles. It's kind of this inverted U in mileage and proximity for commuting mileage anyway. How far people live from work. People who are really poor tend to live in neighborhoods that are close to those environmentally impacted areas where there are factories and other places where they're employed. People who are really high income can live in those neighborhoods and close to, like in Beverly Hills, for instance, and just go a couple of blocks down the street and to their bank building or wherever they're working. Or not working, maybe they're not even commuting. Then people who are lower middle income, they're the ones who are going out to live in Riverside, Fraser Park up north on the 5, and driving every day an hour to maybe 3 hours each way to get to work. Renters tend to drive less, they're paying less gas tax than the drivers. So as a share of all taxes collected in the state, the gas tax, and I'm including both gas and diesel tax here, vehicle fuel taxes, are a pretty small portion, 5% of the revenue that the state collects. So that's, you have income taxes, sales taxes, all kinds of different business taxes, tobacco tax, which may be increasing, and 5%. So it's not huge, but when you think of how much all the money that the state collects, it's a big pot of money. Again, your gas tax, it comprises only a small part. This is of all the different costs of owning and operating a vehicle. The gas tax, and again, this is the same data sources I used in those bar graphs. It's $188 per year, 4% of your total costs. So we'll come back to this. This has really important implications.
It's per capita,
Average per. This one is per car.
Seems low per capita.
Yeah, this is per car. This is per car. So when we're doing this analysis, here are the alternatives that we're going to look at. We're going to say, 1, do nothing, just keep it the same. Another alternative is we could increase the gas tax. One choice is to tie it to inflation, which we'll just say 2% a year. So automatically, whether the legislature votes on it or not, the gas tax is going to bump up 2% maybe every January 1st. Another alternative, and we base this off of a federal proposal that was introduced in Congress, and of course it never even got a vote, 5 cent a gallon increase. Okay. And then, right now, by the way, we're paying in California in state gas taxes 36 cents a gallon. The federal gas tax is half of that, 18 cents a gallon. So other alternatives that we looked at, and this is like transportation nerds love something called a mileage-based user fee. So instead of charging people for every gallon they use, charge them for every mile they drive. And so what are going to be the benefits of that? Why would someone say, that's a good idea? That's yeah, the electric car drivers will still have to pay for the miles that they're using. Now, if you have an electric car right now, you're not going to be too excited about that. But in turn, so is it going to be the rich people or the poor people who are going to be more likely to be driving an electric car? Yeah, richer people. So this is kind of I don't know. It's not, doesn't sound very equitable to me. It's, what we have right now is fairly regressive in terms of tax structure, tax fairness. So one potential mileage-based user fee, and there's a lot of experiments. This is not just a pie-in-the-sky theoretical thing. There's a lot of states that are, including California, that have pilot projects doing this. The most advanced, again, no coincidence, it's Oregon. Oregon is the leader. They're on their, I think they're either their second or their third pilot, kind of fine-tuning what their mileage-based user fee will be. And the easiest one is there's a reader, an electronic reader at the gas pump, and it reads your odometer. So you don't do anything else. You just like put the gas in, and it can show you too, like how much. And another thing that's different about the gas tax and a mileage-based user fee is the gas tax, you pay the tax, and then you drive. So since you've already paid that tax, you might as well drive more, right? But a mileage-based user fee, you pay as you go. So at each extra mile you drive, you kind of like see, oh, there's another cent, another, and you see it. You can see it on a display on your dashboard, adding up how much you're being charged for each additional mile that you're driving. Another possibility, this is one, I'm not going to show it today, but it's a two-tiered mileage fee. Because we recognize that there are public benefits from vehicles that have lower emissions, maybe we should we're still going to charge the electric vehicles something, but we're going to give them a break. And then vehicles that have higher emissions, we're going to charge them a little bit more, so maybe two tiers. And this is another thing that different states are experimenting with. Now, those are the explicit choices. Implicit is the hidden alternative, the local sales tax. Because we have this huge shortfall that I showed you in gas tax revenue, and we don't have enough to maintain our roads, to improve our transportation infrastructure. One thing that counties are doing, counties and cities throughout California, throughout the country, they're raising local sales taxes. And on next Tuesday, indeed, we're going to be asked again to raise local sales tax because no action has been taken on the gas tax. Until this shortfall got to be really large, local sales taxes were not pursued as a way of generating transportation revenue. The federal and state funds funded by the gas taxes were loaded with money. They had more money than they knew what to do with. That's not true nowadays. And so we have this problem, and one of the quote-unquote solutions is to raise the local sales tax. And that has important equity issues. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I just want to introduce it right now. Any thoughts about why there might be an equity problem with the sales tax as a way for funding transportation projects? For number one, there's a lot of people paying for that sales tax who don't drive. And the other is that in general, the sales tax is a highly regressive tax. Now, I'm not saying the gas tax is better. Indeed, it comes out to be pretty much the same. But of all the different choices out there, the sales tax is one of the least progressive, most regressive taxes, yeah.
I was thinking for the audience, you might want to just tell them what you mean by regressive.
Sure, yeah. So, regressive means as part of, yeah, it doesn't mean like political left or right. This is a term used by tax economists. Regressive means that as a share of your income, you're paying more tax if you're poor or a poor household than you are if you're a wealthy household. Progressive tax is like the California state income tax, that if you're a low-income household, you pay a smaller percent of your income in tax than someone who's high income, supposedly. Now, there are, yes, there are people who have really either smart or wily, depending on how you want to term that, tax advisors who find the loopholes and they end up not paying taxes. So because of tax loopholes, taxes that were progressive may end up being actually regressive. Okay, so in our analysis that we're going to be diving into in just a second here, we're excluding, as I said earlier, expenditures. So we're just looking at what are the effects of different choices of raising revenue. We're not going to talk about spending it. There's a lot of people who have ideas on how to spend it. We're not going to be looking at commercial vehicle traffic. We're just looking at the gasoline fuel tax. We're not looking at diesel fuel taxes. And in addition to fuel taxes, in many places, commercial vehicles also have to pay weight taxes, like how big a vehicle, or either on their weight or their number of axles that they have, and they have to pay more. We're not directly looking at households who don't own vehicles. So even though they're not paying directly into a gas tax, they're paying indirectly. You know, every time something is delivered to their house, there is, you know, some type of tax is being paid for the vehicle that delivered those goods. When they take their Lyft or their Uber or their taxi, there's taxes being paid. We, for the most part, do not look at vehicle choice and purchase decisions. So there's two reasons for this. One is a general lack of data that, you know, if the gas tax goes up, we're pretty sure that there's going to be some people who are sitting on the fence, and because the gas tax is now so high, they're going to elect for a more fuel-efficient vehicle instead of that Ford 150 pickup. But no one knows exactly what that relationship is. Also, another reason that we're not going to be looking at the vehicle choice is because it plays such a small, the gas tax is a small part of your overall taxes, of your overall operational cost, rather. And we're not going to be looking at residential relocation. Again, there's a lot of factors that influence people's choice of where to live, where to work. Maybe there's some tiny incremental effect that a gas tax has on that, or a mileage-based user fee, but it's not going to be very large. Okay, so in health impact assessment, those of you who were in my course last year, you know all about logic frameworks. Here's a simplified logic framework for our gas tax analysis. So we have a choice of changing the gas on the left-hand side, in that red box, changing the gas tax, changing mileage-based user fee. What are the direct first-order effects of that? So one is you're going to generate revenue. The other is you might change how far people drive, you might change their vehicle choice, and you might change their mode choice. So instead of driving, they might choose to walk or bike. And so I said on the vehicle choice, we don't have a lot of data, but we do have data, and we did an analysis of this. A lot of transportation data is out there on how much people change their vehicle mileage and their mode choice, their choice to, instead of driving, maybe walking, maybe biking, when travel costs go up. Those choices then have these health-related effects. They impose costs on households, they'll change vehicle emissions, they'll change traffic congestion, noise, and your traffic injury risk. And then we have the downstream health outcomes. So what we're going to be focusing mostly on is this, right now, is this relationship. When we change travel costs, how does vehicle mileage change? We use something, so the data that we used is the National Household Transportation Survey. For those of you who have not used it before, it is a fantastic resource. Now, there are some tricks to using it, but there is an online data access tool that allows you to generate tables from this, and you can select to analyze vehicles, drivers, you can look at vehicle miles, person miles, walking, biking, driving, taking the train, all of this. It's a great, in HTS, it's a great resource. We use something called quantile regression. And quantile regression is a special type of regression. Unlike least squares, your normal type of regression, which focuses on identifying a mean value and a distribution around that mean, quantile regression focuses on the median. And it's useful when you have weird distributions with a lot of outliers. So with transportation, driving data, there are a few people out there who just drive ridiculous amounts. And then you have some people who don't drive at all. And the people who don't drive at all, that's easier to deal with. But then you have those people who drive 10 miles a month. So you have these weird distributions. So quantile regression helps us with this. So we calculated something called the price elasticity of demand. That's another economic term. All it means, just think of elastic, that if people don't change, if the cost changes but people don't change their behavior, that's not elastic. That's pretty fixed. And that comes close to a value of 1. None of this is very elastic. But people who have, down here, who drive less, down in the 10th percentile of annual vehicle miles traveled, they tend to be a little bit more flexible. So think about this. This person who's up here at the 90th percentile, there's a reason they're driving 50,000 miles a year. It's not just because they don't have anything else to do. And so even if prices go up higher, they have to eat it. They keep on driving. And it may be their work. It may be that they're forced to live a long way from work, long commutes. It might be that they live in a rural area. And it's just a long ways to go to any kind of services. The grocery store is a 20-mile drive. Down at the other end of annual vehicle miles traveled, people have maybe they have more choices or they're more price sensitive. Bottom line is there's a little bit more flexibility. But So even though all of these price elasticities are 0.99, which means it's not very flexible. Even for this, because we drive so much, a small percentage change is huge in terms of how much aggregate miles and a gas tax could change, and those downstream health effects related to that, the air emissions, the noise, the congestion. So in general, this elasticity is higher. That means more response for people who are low mileage. We have similar graphs. We did this for income. So people who are lower income households, more elastic, more responsive to price. People who have less fuel efficient vehicles, makes sense that if your car is eating up, you have a Hummer and it's really eating up a lot of gas, then you're going to be a little bit more price sensitive, everything else being equal, than the person who's driving the Tesla, who I don't care what the gas price is. It's going to be driving the same amount. Urban households tend to be more elastic than in response to gasoline prices than rural households. Yeah.
Highly inelastic demand and that 90% up. Presumably a lot of that is businesses that are driving and then they're passing on part of the tax to the customers.
Oh, okay. This is based on NHTS, National Household Transportation Survey. So
It's just households.
it's just households, yeah. But there's a lot of business travel in there, and these people are maybe independent and business people. Christina.
I wanted to ask, I was thinking that same thing, and I was wondering, especially with the weight being so impactful on the maintenance, like where are truck and that kind of occupational?
So if it is a gasoline-powered vehicle that's not being used for business, it's here. But if it's primarily for business or it's using diesel, it's not here. So that's a separate, we're using National Household Transportation Survey. So if so that's going to be a huge, both in terms of air pollution and roadways.
Would the driver be doubly impacted because you would have this gas tax, and gas and carbon, whatever the other system is?
Oh, if there is, because you have your household, you mean?
Sorry, I mean occupational drivers.
Yeah. So there's going to be cost impact. So if you're also changing the diesel tax, you're going to be impacted twice. So depending on, all of us will be, because we're going to be, diesel tax, we're all paying those prices for transportation when you have the semi-truck. We're also paying in terms of the externalities, the air pollution and other effects generated from those trucks that are going down the roadway. But that's a whole other data set, whole other analysis. And actually, when we went into this, we talked with people, at least locally here in the LA area, with SCAG, who use and have data on commercial vehicle traffic. And they say that their data is horrible. I mean, they'll admit it, that they do not have good data or good models of the diesel-fueled vehicles, how much they're traveling. But they did say that they are probably going to be highly inelastic, that the companies who can, like UPS, have already figured out ways to reduce their mileage for a lot of other reasons. Because even though there's a diesel tax or a fuel tax, maybe they can get away from using the vehicle, that type of fuel, they have the worker's cost. And the more time your worker is driving around on the freeway, that's costing them a huge amount of money. And so they've tried to make that really efficient. Yeah.
Real quick, Brian, the federal reimbursement for one of our students who's driving is about 55 cents a mile. So raising it a penny, who cares? It's not that much. And so you've got a penny per vehicle mile traveled. Suppose you make it 10 cents. Suddenly we're not way over. It becomes a big difference between another dime or 55 cents per mile than a penny per mile. So the elasticity is really driven by the quantity of money here, isn't it, in many ways? Or would it?
Oh, that it's not a linear response. Within the range that we looked at, so we're using NHTS data over several years, and we looked at change. So basically what we did is when there's and this data, it has time on it. And we can look at local fuel prices and see, when there's a change in fuel price, did people change how much they're driving? And fuel prices in the data that we looked at changed over $1, a lot more, and it was pretty linear in that range. And so this is just a small subset of that range. But yeah, if you got beyond that, yes, I would expect non-linear effects, non-linear elasticity. Let's skip that one. So here, as the results of our model, the transportation analysis, that we saw that here's our change in the average cost of EMT for each one of these scenarios. So we translated how the gas tax into how much are people paying right now per mile if we so we'll set it at 0. If we change the gas tax to a 2% annual increase, they'll pay an additional 0.17 cents per mile and a mileage-based user fee, which we fixed at 1.6 cents a mile. The change would be 0. Okay, so those extra costs then translate to possible changes in fuel and mileage, annual mileage. This is millions of miles per year. So just fixing the gas tax to an annual inflation change, 2% per year, will lead to 1.3 million fewer miles per year driven.
Billion.
Huh? Billion.
Million. Yes, billion. Sorry. Yeah. It's a big number. 15 cents per gallon is going to be 5.2 billion fewer miles, and this is just for California. Yeah, just California. Okay. So you increase the gas tax, people will drive less. If we don't change how much people are paying, we assume constant mileage, so 0 change. Okay, so we talked about the first part, what is the connection between travel cost and vehicle miles? And now we're going to look at the cost burden very quickly. How is this going to affect different households? Why this is important. This is a graph that I've probably used way too many times. This is from a study done back in the data from the 90s, and it came out in around 2000. There's an association between health and income. So health here, our proxy is mortality risk. This is Backlund, is the study if you want to look it up. Backlund and Sorley. So if you're earning, this is your annual household income, and let's just say this is about the median for the national median. If you're earning below the national median, a change in your income makes a huge difference in your health. That's the slope here. So if I take someone who's living in poverty and I give them $1, that dollar has a lot more value for their health than if I gave Bill Gates $1. Out here, a change in income is not making much of an impact on health. This is a cohort study. It's not cross-sectional. So if we have the gas tax, how is that going to impact people's health? First of all, we've got to ask how much is it going to change in their pocketbooks. Truth is, not much. The changes, even the larger changes, when you look at someone, let's say our Latino household, if we changed to the mileage-based user fee, they would be paying $20 fewer a month. The average Asian household would be paying an average of $25 more a month. This is the mileage-based user fee. I'm not going to show the graph for the gas tax, increase in the gas tax, but I'll just tell you the maximum was about, for any one of these groups, was $150 per year. So very small changes. So we'll skip that. This is important. So I'm comparing how much households are going to be paying if we switch the gas tax, increase the gas tax by 15 cents a gallon. The differences within any one of these groups is much, much larger than between groups. So Latinos versus Asians versus whites, poor households, higher income households, the changes are much larger between them. No, it doesn't. Okay, so let's skip this one. I'm going to talk about my monetization here. So one thing that we did, in addition to looking at the cost impact, we wanted to look at the externalities. This is what Dr. Jarrett brought up earlier, is we're not paying for the air pollution that's being produced, the congestion, the noise, the injury risk. So what if we took care of what economists call externalities? What if we tried to pay for those externalities with a gas tax or with a mileage-based user fee? How much would we have to charge? And then another question, and this is the question that we explored, is using that same logic, can we assess what are the changes in externalities in dollars for these different alternatives? And so what we did was we monetized things. We took research from the Victoria Transportation Policy Institute. They've done a lot of cost-benefit research on transportation, where they have estimates of, for the average car, how much do the air emission externalities cost, that's cents, per vehicle miles traveled. So this is 3.48 cents of air pollution impacts for the average car. Your diesel bus, 10.6. Noise, okay, that's going to be highest, not surprisingly, for the motorcycle. 10.56 cents per mile driven by each motorcycle. And then we have our crash impacts. So the one of the things that I want to show here is that in terms of dollars, or estimated dollars, the injury impacts are going to be much larger than the others. What we did is then we applied those changes, that transportation model that I told you about, that National Household Transportation Survey. We looked at how each type of vehicle, because we have data on which type of vehicle people are driving, how far are they driving, and how are they going to change their mileage given a gas tax or a mileage-based user fee. And then we estimated changes in the dollars of air emissions. This is millions of dollars a year. Noise emissions, traffic injury risks, and the total. What this monetization allows us to do, and I know a lot of public health people are really uncomfortable with the idea of monetization, and it could be wrong. But if it is fair, if the way we monetize is fair between different alternatives, then what this allows us to do is we can say, not that, our 3.7 cents increase in gas tax will decrease the externalities by 136 million. I don't know if it's 136 million. It may be 20 million. It may be 20 billion. But if it's fair between these, I can say, you know what, for the state, this is the value, the extra value. So in addition to the revenue, we have a decrease of, for the highest, the 15 cents a gallon gas tax, $540 million a year. And you can do this across different alternatives. What's really super valuable about this is because you can also compare not just the alternatives you looked at, but something totally different to put it into context. To get the same reduction in air emissions, at least in terms of dollars, we'd have to increase the share of vehicles out there, a 12%, basically a 12% increase in electric vehicles to get the same impact, 187 million decrease. We'd have to get 12% more electric vehicles out there to meet the same impact as a 15 cent a gallon decrease in a 15 cent per gallon increase in the gas tax. So what I just want to conclude with is that, number one,